Hey everyone, welcome back to the Coop with Wire Hatchery, where we talk all things poultry in hopes of educating chicken keepers and inspiring future flock owners. I'm Tessa.
And I'm Jess.
And today we have a special guest. Larkin Hansen, the author of the Backyard Homestead Seasonal Planner, What to Do and When to Do It, is joining us.
Good morning, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're so excited to be speaking with you today. Your book was the first pick for our new Book of the Month Club.
Yes. When I first got my homestead, I had so many ideas, and I don't know, when you first get started, you want to do everything. So I felt a little overwhelmed. So I picked up the seasonal planner, and I tell you, I have been using it for years. And I'm proud to say that it was my suggestion that this is our Book of the Month book. We have so many questions for you, so let's get started. What inspired you to be an author?
First, thank you for choosing the book. It's well, I've done quite a few books now, and that one is probably my favorite. So I'm really glad it's been helpful.
Yes.
What inspired me to become an author is that I'm actually a journalist, and I covered general items till we bought our farm in '92, and then I specialized in sustainable agriculture and sustainable forestry. So I had quite a few years of going around and visiting farms and talking to farmers and researching things. And it was just like the best job in the world. And this is as I'm getting our farm started. And one of the great things, of course, is if you run into an issue and you don't quite know how to handle it, you find somebody who does know how to do that. And then you go to do a story on them and you get paid for it. And then you know how to do it.
Smart.
It was just perfect. Because one of the problems back then was there was not a lot of easily available information on many of these topics. So you really had to go out and find it, and you had to work through some of the issues on your own. So that was all, that's the basis. And then I got a call from a publisher that wanted me to do a book on small scale beef production. And then it just took off from there. So I got really, really lucky.
Wow. Now, so beef production, it really feels like you have experience in almost all areas. So it's clear that something like this was essential for both new and experienced homesteaders because, most of us that consider ourselves to be homesteaders, we don't have the full spectrum of different animals or property size. So how did you know that you needed to write this particular book?
The reason I decided to write this book was if you are a homesteader, if you're trying to do a whole bunch of different things, the orchard, the garden, the chickens, the cattle, the pigs, we had pigs for a couple of years. How do you fit all that together? And how do you know what to do and when to do it? And you go looking for that information, and it's very difficult to find. You can find bits and pieces, but I never came across any integrated source that said, well, you really need to make your first cutting of hay in June, so don't plan on making your firewood that time of year. Just how do you make the labor flow go through the year and appropriate to where you are in the country, because everybody's seasons differ quite a bit. So that was just a really fun little puzzle to solve for me. It's systems management, really.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's an awesome homesteading puzzle. I love it. So how long did it take you to organize all the tasks that need to be done in a year on the homestead?
About 30 years. And
oh my
I'm
gosh.
still learning. I'm still learning. But to get it on paper, once I had suggested this to the publisher, and it took quite a long time. It took me about 2 years, which is, I write fast because I'm a journalist. And so that was a long time to write a book, but I had to, I kept a farm diary just to figure out what in the heck I was doing every month, because, at that point, it all kind of just flows and you aren't thinking about it too much. And then I was still having problems of how to organize it all. My editor, Deb Burns at Story, who is fantastic, said, you need a spreadsheet. You know, you've got so many things going on here. You know, we divide it into really 12 seasons. Each season is subdivided into 3 subseasons. And then there's so many things going on. You know, you've got the livestock and the poultry and the orchard and the woods and the haymaking and everything. So how do you put all that together? And that's why I needed the spreadsheet, and that's why it took me so long. So
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, even with 30 years experience, only taking 2 years really does seem condensed. You must be a fast writer. So, if we think back to the beginning of your personal homesteading journey, you know, most of us, you've got a starting point where you find a love for something on your homestead, and then you expand on it. So, what was your starting point, and how did you know that you wanted to expand?
you know, that is, I love that premise. You start with what you love. That's
Hmm.
just perfect. That's just perfect. And I just boy, I just love animals. And I saved up my babysitting money when I was a kid after my folks moved to an exurb, so it was a place where it could happen. And I
Hmm.
bought my first pony.
Oh my
And after
goodness.
that, yeah, and well, I was 14 and sugar was great. And after that, it was just, you know, well, what else can we do? This is all really fun. And, you know, you keep trying new things.
Right. So, okay, so you started when you were 14. A lot of people are starting as adults. Like, oh gosh, I can't wait to talk to you about kids on the farmstead. But for us adults who are thinking about expanding, what is a reasonable timeline, just just in years or months, that they could expect to be able to get a homestead up and running?
That is a really complicated question.
It is.
And I should clarify, you know, we didn't actually get our farm till 92, and I was an adult. I was in my early 30s.
Hmm.
Um, so, and aside from the pony and some chickens that my mom had a couple summers and stuff, I really didn't have that farm background. So I felt like I was starting with, you know, willingness to work really hard and
Hmm.
everything I could read, of course. But you do kind of start from scratch. And when you look at what sort of a timeline you should be on, boy, that is so individual. It's what do you want to do? You start with one thing. What is your cash flow? You've got to have cash.
Hmm.
You have to have cash to pay your property taxes. Unless you're totally off the grid, you need to keep the lights on and the heat. And if you are off the grid, you need to buy all the stuff that it takes to get you off the grid. So how are you going to keep that going? What is your skill set? Do you know how to build things, fix machinery, raise livestock, grow a garden? And that all takes time to acquire. So I would say you need to be practical, you need to be realistic, and set your own timeline. There's no rush.
Absolutely. There's definitely so many parts that need to come together, and everybody's timeline is a little bit different. What do you think holds people back from making their homestead work for them?
Um, you know, another very interesting and complicated question. I'm sure all sorts of things. I once asked an ag extension specialist in, you know, small farms, which we would probably call homesteads now. I said, what happens to people who fail? And he said, don't call it failure, because a lot of them start one enterprise and figure out that it's not going to really work for them with where they are in life or what land base they have and stuff like that. And they don't go away, they try something else. So think about that. That's very encouraging. Just because, you know, something doesn't work doesn't mean you have to quit completely. You can stick around. The other thing that I saw that was discouraging for me back then was, you know, you see a lot of startups. People get their homesteads going and then they decide to start selling some of what they produce. And they generally have excellent quality, and they go out and they go to the farmers markets, or they start, you know, internet sales and stuff like that. And they go gung ho for a few years and then they crash. And the problem is they run out of energy and time and labor before they have the money to hire what they need to keep the job going. So that's a real tricky bottleneck for a lot of people who want to start selling farm products, is you really have to watch the sustainability aspect of it. Can I keep this going at this level? You know, I'm 23 now. When I'm 43, am I still going to want to be getting up at, 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning to go to the farmer's market 2 hours away and then come back and do all the chores? And so you have to be careful. You have to really figure out how much labor this is all going to take, because as you get better at it, you sell more and it gets more demanding. So that's just my personal observation.
I think that that's completely true. And I love that you said that, because even myself, I've done that where you jump the gun. You think I had success, and now how can I make this better instead of maintaining and learning? So I appreciate that, because it reminds me about, in the preface, you talk about these important things in homesteading. You can't do it all at the same time. You don't need to do it all, and do things in their proper season. So can you share just a frustration or mistake that led you to realization? Because I think our listeners and Jess and I are going to relate to this.
That could be a whole book, really.
Maybe it should be.
Oh man, I have talked with other farmers, and yeah, we should do a book on farm bloopers, because it's if you're learning this stuff, you're gonna make some outright mistakes. You're gonna go down rabbit holes that aren't going to turn out so well. I guess one of the frustrations for me was that I really did want to do it all. And I remember my brother-in-law saying, well, Ann, you can't do it all. And I thought, yes, I can. I just can't do it all at once.
That made you want to do it more, didn't it? Oh.
Yeah. But the thing I really couldn't do, and I badly wanted to do, was field crops. That would be corn, small grains, hay, the classic 4-year crop rotation in our area here. And I just couldn't put it together. It takes actually quite a lot of equipment, which is expensive. And we did not start with any money at all, really. And, and I was not familiar with bigger equipment. I'm actually a lot more comfortable with it now, because I made a lot of hay through the years. But to grow field crops, you've got to cultivate. Well, no, you don't start with cultivating. You have to work the soil. And back then, we were moldboard plowing, and now they're doing other systems. But you still got to have plows and discs, and then you got to have a planter, and then you have to have a way to cultivate the field to get the weeds out, and then you have to harvest it. And those are all different pieces of equipment, and that is a lot. And it was just too much. We had 3 little kids, and my husband, of course, wasn't into the farm. He had other things going. And then I had that off-farm job with the newspaper. So I just finally decided, we aren't a crop farm. We are going to have to focus on livestock. And that's what I did. But it took me a while.
Yeah, that's definitely, for me, having my own homestead, the education and the learning and the bloopers are all part of the amazing process. I too could write a book about the bloopers on our farm over here.
There you go. We can collaborate. But I look back now, and yeah, there was times when I was crying. It's like, I don't know how to get this PTO shaft connected and stuff like that. And I look back now, and really, it was all such a joy. It was just fun to get up in the morning and go out and figure out, okay, well, what needs to happen today? And the kids loved it. They could build forts and dig holes and chase chickens. And oh boy, it was just, it was such a great way to live.
It's awesome. So what does your homestead look like today? And has anything changed since you wrote this book?
Oh, yes. And this is probably the coolest thing of all. As you are probably starting to realize, humans actually get old and lose a lot of their energy levels and stuff like that. And I realized a couple of years ago that maybe it was time. And so you spend your whole career building this sustainable farm, and that's the last part of the puzzle. Is now what? If I go away, will this continue? This thing I've built, how do I make sure that it's sustainable into the future when I'm gone? And so it was with much fear and trembling that we put it on the market. Unfortunately, our kids who had badly wanted to keep the farm were not able to for various reasons, although they still have visiting privileges, which is wonderful. And after we put it on the market and we decided we are going to price this so it's accessible to a younger family. Otherwise, we're just going to get, somebody who wants to raise fancy horses or something like that, which is fine, but not quite what we were looking for. And fortunately, I had was in touch with a young organic farmer down the road from us, and he brought his best friend from high school over, who was with his family, was looking for a place out of town to live in the because of the pandemic, basically. And they bought the farm, and they are just perfect. So it's still certified organic, and they have jumped in with both feet, and they've got cattle and pigs and chicken and a big garden, and they really are just so solid. I'm just stunned at how well that worked, and they are taking it to the next level. They've already started with some direct marketing, and they have become friends, and they are just really, really fine people. So that was the last piece of the puzzle. Is this really going to be sustainable? And as it turns out, it is. And I went, once in a while they'll call. And so I went down this fall and I mowed the trails for them and lent them a hand in the garden last spring. But really, they're going to be fine. And the best part of it all is they have 4 young kids who are so excited to be there. And that farm needs kids. So that was just fabulous.
And I think you might be my new hero. I think you absolutely might be. I absolutely love that you did that, because as a young farmer, I think that it's part of our national culture that we have these people, we have young farmers in the world, but the accessibility of being able to establish and purchase and receive the education that they need to be able to continue that sustainability is few and far between. So
Yes.
for you to have done that, I love it. You've changed the course of their life and their children's lives, making it accessible. I just love that. I can't even say that enough.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah,
Mhm.
it has meant the absolute world to me. So.
I bet. But if they called you and asked you to do one chore that would be your absolute least favorite chore on the farm, what would it be?
Cleaning the chicken coop. Oh, what a mess.
Hey, same
But,
here.
oh
Yeah.
boy, yeah, especially after a long winter, but it does make the garden grow.
That's hilarious.
So we talk about, we've been talking about the homesteads, and for me personally, I am a city girl that married a country boy. So I came from more of a kind of urban area. Do you think that an urban homesteader would find your book to be useful as well?
Well, I would say first that there are books out there specific to urban homesteading that could fill in a lot of details and tricks and techniques that would be useful to an urban homesteader. And there's so many interesting things you can do, from balcony gardens to mini gardens and vertical gardening, things like that. So that said, my book does not deal with the details. It deals with really the general principles. When do you start your tomato plants? When do you when your chickens start laying eggs? When do you, if you're raising meat chickens, what are when's a good time to butcher, stuff like that? Although you probably aren't doing that in an apartment building. But anyways, it does give you kind of the big picture. If you need the details, get a good book on urban homesteading. So, or buy both. Who cares?
Yeah, right. Oh, absolutely. That you
What?
should have a whole selection of books on your shelf from urban to full scale farm.
Yeah,
um,
and I should point out, if you're starting out, often you're short of cash. And so
yep.
don't feel like you have to go out and pay full price for all these books. Some are going to be available at the library. Some you can borrow, some you can get used. If you got a Kindle, maybe some are on the Kindle. So, don't be cautious with how you spend your money. I know I shouldn't say that. I'm supposed to be selling books, but actually I would like to get farmers started.
Absolutely. I know I can appreciate that part too, because building the library, buying the equipment, all of these things come with a cost. And somebody who has hopes and dreams of eventually having something like what you built, it can feel overwhelming. So
Yes.
that is a good tip. When you're in the beginning, see what you can get for a fraction of the cost. Because, and this is going to tie into kind of what I wanted to talk about with how large your homestead is, because in urban gardening, yes, we can have things like apartment gardening, and those are true homesteads too. They just look a little different. But if somebody wants to run a functional homestead that's not completely self-sufficient, but can do a lot of these things, and they're just starting out, how much property do you think it would take for somebody to just have like a mini version? An acre? Less? What have you seen?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah. And I would say, one of the things we have not done here is define the word homestead. It's a real loose
That's true.
term.
It
So
is.
what does that mean? Does it mean just that you are trying to raise some food, or does it mean that you're really trying to be self-sufficient as much as possible? And I would say that you could say it fits somewhere in that spectrum. So you have to define what you mean by homestead. What do I want to do? And after that, I would say if you want to, have the whole palette, if you want to do livestock and a garden and maybe an orchard and a woodlot and stuff like that, it depends first, where are you in the country? If you're in the middle of the Nebraska plains, it's unlikely you're going to have a woodlot, so you might as well just cross that off. But one of my favorite books that really got me going, and is probably a good basis to start with, is by a guy named John Seymour, Seymour. He was a British author, and he did a lot of books on this topic. And the one he did was called Farming for Self-Sufficiency, Independence on a 5-Acre Farm. And that is probably a nice lot to start with, I would think. And I found that book, in fact, I read it so much it fell apart, and I should probably get a new copy. But one of the things he covers is that you can be quite self-sufficient. If you have neighbors who are in the same boat, you can do a lot of labor trading or with them, so that one guy does the pigs and the other guy does the chickens, and that relieves both your labor burdens, and then you can trade some. Another point he makes is that, come on, we aren't going to be totally self-sufficient. If I had to give up salt and coffee, I would die. So, you got to think, you're not going to be totally self-sufficient, but you can be pretty close. And if you have 5 acres in a good part of the world, then that might be enough to get you going.
So when we talk about defining a homestead, mine is definitely defined by feathers. I have lots of chicken map here and lots of chickens. So speaking of chickens, what is your favorite chicken breed and why?
Oh, wow. I think chickens are the best livestock to start with. They're relatively inexpensive. They don't take up much room or housing. They need feed, but not in the quantities that larger livestock does. So that's a great place to start. And that's where we started. And of course, back then we did not have quite the array of breeds and varieties that are being offered now. But they were offering combinations, assortments. Usually your minimum buy back then was 25-day-old chicks, and you could get combinations. So five each of 5 different breeds and stuff. So I did that for years, and it was very fun. My dad called the flock the Rainbow Coalition, which was an old political term, but anyways, and we are talking of laying hens now. I'm not, we raised meat chickens too, but for the laying breeds, which actually are smarter and have more personality than the meat chickens and much longer lives, I would say they all have good points. They're all fun in their own way. We had Banty chickens for a couple years, and the entertainment value there is just huge. There's no meat on them, and they aren't the best egg producers, but boy, they were just hilarious around the yard. One of my friends commented once that she said they're all just basically juvenile delinquents. You walk around the corner and there's the Banty chickens, and they all look like they have a cigarette pack rolled up in their t-shirt sleeve and a can of spray paint in their hand.
I could not
They're
agree
just,
more.
why? It's not me. It wasn't me. But overall, I would have to say my favorite breed was the Buff Orpington. They're just, they're pretty mellow chickens. They're pretty maternal. They were just nice to have around. I really liked them. But, I also like the Rhode Island Red Roosters were my favorite for colors. We had friends that asked us to collect the tail feathers so they could use them to tie flies for fly fishing. They're beautiful. And then those barred Plymouth Rocks are just also real solid birds. So they're all good. They're all good, but Buff Orpingtons if I really have to choose.
That, I love what you said about bantams, because Jess and I both have big bantam flocks, so we completely understand what you mean when you say that. So when we're talking about these animals on the farm with your kids, we talked about kids earlier, and both Jess and I and Meyer Hatchery itself, we think that having kids on the farmstead or the homestead or just with these poultry animals is essential to their youth. So do you have any advice for families who are starting out that have little kids at home from your experience?
The best advice I ever heard on that topic was from Temple Grandin. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but
I don't think so.
She revolutionized livestock handling in this country and is quite an amazing woman and severely autistic. But she's world famous now. Anyways, I was so privileged once, she's one of my personal heroes, to have dinner next to her at a gathering, Mother Earth News Fair, actually. And they put me with her because we share a common interest in cattle. But she had a lot of parents coming up to her during the meal and saying, here's my kid, and they're on the spectrum, and what can I do to help? And I thought her advice applied across the board to all kids. It doesn't matter what kind of a kid you are. And she said, give them a job, put them in charge of something. And that is just fantastic. I thought was the best advice I ever heard. And of course, having grown up in a large family, I'm one of 13 kids. We kind of grew up helping around the house because they needed us. And it gives you such a sense of confidence as a kid to know that, hey, I can do this, I got this. And ownership, this is all great, but don't overwhelm them, Don't send them out to vaccinate cattle when they're 4, okay?
Are you sure?
Yeah, we gotta be a little age appropriate here. So I would say, yeah, make them part of the enterprise. And then the second thing is, if you're a kid out in the country, wow, you can have so much fun. You can dig holes and go look for Indian bones or whatever you want to do. So I think if you're a kid on a farm, you really need to build some forts and explore and find bugs and start a rock collection, anything that grabs your fancy. Just have some fun. One of the things I love about the 4 young kids who are now on our farm is I have never seen any of them with anything electronic in their hands. They are outside and doing stuff, and they are happy, smart kids. It's just so cool.
It is.
So since it's the start of the new year, what is your advice for someone who's just picked up your book?
Dive in.
That's all that needs to be said.
I really think so.
Yeah. I think that I just have one more question for you, and that's the most serious question in the world. Would you like to come to my farm and run it for me?
The wonderful thing about having a farm is it's your little kingdom, and you get to run it the way you want. I would happy to come over and be a farmhand for a while. Just tell me what to do. But the decisions are yours to make, and the homestead is yours to build, and that's so much of the joy of it. Saying, yeah, I don't really like Buff Orpingtons. I'm going to go with the Rhode Island Reds. So you get to do all that, and you can decide, yeah, I'd like to milk sheep, but I don't want to get up early in the morning, so I'm just going to milk at noon. All those little things, and you get to create such a happy working world. It's such a joy. So don't let go of that to anybody else. Just I'll come and, I'm not going to clean your chicken coop, but I would weed the garden.
Oh,
So.
come on. That's
That's
really
what
all I
Tess
wanted
was
you to.
asking for. She wants someone to clean her chicken coop.
I was really hoping you'd say that wasn't your least favorite chore, because that is literally all I want.
Oh, that's funny. When we bought our place, they had a big chicken coop because they'd sold a lot of eggs, the people before us. And I don't think it had been cleaned for years. And
Oh,
that memory is still green with me. So
that's why they ruined it for you. Oh my goodness.
I guess, yes. So
Well, and this has been absolutely wonderful. I can't thank you enough for joining us. I know that this book was not only inspirational to me, but Jess as well. And you've just been a complete joy.
well, thank you so much. This has really been fun. I mean, I feel like we should adjourn to the local coffee shop and keep going, but I suppose we all have other things to do today. So, but
I
I,
guess.
I wish you all the luck in the world in your farm enterprises. And if anybody's trying to decide whether, do I really want to get chickens? I'd say, yeah, get them. Give it a try. What have you got to lose? Where will you be in
Nothing.
10 years? Yeah, if you don't get started, you're not going to be anywhere. So get going. Just get going.
It's absolutely true. And with that, we thank you for listening to The Coop. Be sure to subscribe, and if you'd be so kind, drop us a review. Have a poultry related question or topic you'd like us to cover? We want to hear from you. Send us an email to podcast@meyerhatchery.com.